All right. Well, howdy, howdy, and happy Tuesday. Welcome to the Closer to the Heart, sorry, Closer to the Heart podcast. I am your host, Christina Goerss, Power Girl Christina. And I'm happy to have you here today. We're talking about the eradication or attempted eradication of the woman and the rise of the divine feminine. Speaking of divine feminine, without any further ado, I'm going to introduce my co-host, Jeanee Andrewartha. Hello, and thank you for joining us today, Jeanee.
Hey, Christina. Hi, everyone out there. How are you all?
Yay!
Yay. So, another Tuesday. Big topic. Isn't it amazing how it all runs into everything that's quite topical at the moment in the
It
news
really is
cycle?
amazing how it all lines up like that, because we don't plan it that way, right? Like we plan these way in advance and then the news feed just blows up. It's like God is supporting our cause.
And it also means like looking into it, because we do a lot of research for all of this and looking at a very holistic way. So it kind of encourages us to look a bit deeper into some of these issues, and that I think the news cycle keeps us away from, which is where we want to take a conversation a bit deeper here and show us, the audience, what we've discovered, I guess, ourselves about this.
Yes. Yes, as the Olympics has been, stealing the headlines left and right for different reasons. You're really, again, covering it so perfectly on your LinkedIn profile, Jeanee. You do such a great job of staying on top of this insane news feed. That is definitely not my strong point. Some of these, stories and some of these ideals that are kind of being presented in these weird, twisted ways are a little triggering for me. So it's great to have somebody like you who's just literally just, got the bull by the horns and doing it out there. You've got some fantastic stories. I would highly encourage anybody to follow you on LinkedIn and your LinkedIn profile. And again, we like to always say, if you're not on LinkedIn, if you don't see what's happening there right now, it's really quite inspiring to see the leaders of industry, speaking out in some very bold and, introspective ways. Like they're really diving deep into a lot of this stuff, even though I think that that's not at all the direction the news feed wants to take us. But people are starting to wake up, right? They're starting to see that they're reading between the lines. And what we're trying to do here is, I think, what you were leading to in the beginning, flipping the script. We're at least trying to understand it, from a perspective of using our minds, not just our emotional reaction, and trying to look at this from an intellectual and from a heart center point of view, because that's, I think, the last thing they want us to do, right? To think about these
Yeah,
things deeply,
absolutely.
because they
And
don't
look,
give us any
and,
time
and,
to
and
think about it.
there's a lot happening behind the scenes as people take in a different perspective of what's actually going on in the world. We're talking about people who have a lot of power within the audience here on LinkedIn. And I see it on the other side, building infrastructure, doing things within their own businesses and lives and making significant changes, often to where they live, what the businesses they do, how they run their business. And even starting new businesses that are pushing against the agenda and working together to do that. So this is a great meeting place for people to connect, to exchange ideas. It is like a marketplace of ideas, really, isn't it? Because after all, that's where really everything starts. It all starts with an idea, and then you build upon all of that. And so here we've got this idea, Christina. We're just running with it, see how it goes.
That's
Hopefully,
right, and we're doing great. I mean, this what is this, episode 5? Are we on episode 5? It's hard to keep track because it's been so crazy in our personal lives as well. But yeah, this was an idea that came to me quite some time ago, and I'm just thrilled to see it come to fruition in this way. And I couldn't do it without your help, Jeanee. Like I said, you so balance me out in so many different ways, and it's just really powerful to meet with you every week in this way. And I feel myself already growing. I can see that, there's always room for growth, and we want to do better and better every week. And so we've got a full plate this week.
yeah,
As
good stuff.
always, Jeanee loads me up with these stories to try to illustrate whatever ideals, we're trying to bring to you on a weekly basis. Today, we're talking all about the erasure and eradication of woman. And Jeanee, you really, don't you agree that it kind of starts with this this rhetoric around what the definition of a woman is?
Yeah, look, I mean, as you said, we don't really want to fight for this. We never thought, as Gen Xers, that we would be sitting here right now having to fight for what a definition of a woman is, and that
Never.
politicians everywhere would say, well, we don't know what a woman is. Let's take it on advisement. So we've got some clips there. And because of that, I think we've got this huge controversy out there. But what I thought we'd do is we'd start off with a story last week in Victoria, of a woman, and I put it in the chat, Christina, the link.
Yes, give me
Yeah,
one
yeah.
second. I'll
So
pull it up on the screen.
the last week, a Victorian Afghan woman was jailed for forcing her woman to marry a man who later murdered her 6 weeks later. She was jailed for 12 months, and she was really quite unrepentant about it. And this happened in 2019 in Victoria, Australia. And what the reason why I kind of brought up this story was this idea that women are seen in many societies as property and objects, things to be traded. And for a long time in many different cultures, you had this situation where I don't know if you remember this story, but in different cultures, a woman's virginity was part of the marriage ceremony, and the groom would go in and consummate the marriage, and he'd have to come out with a bloody bed sheet to demonstrate virginity, because her virginity was part of the whole thing. Like, she had to be pure, which I think it was sort of extended to the idea of the white wedding, which Queen Victoria popularized. The idea of a woman's purity, and if she wasn't, potentially she could be stoned to death, burnt, whipped, or tortured, or killed. And it's sort of interesting that there's also another story. I'm going to pop it in the chat.
Okay.
Here, of a recent story in, I think it's Victoria, of where this idea again has risen up, where the historic wedding virginity test, a purity test. It's really quite bizarre, isn't it, that we have this idea that a woman in particular has to be pure. It's not that. I think that in all of us is this idea, and that there's this one partner for life, this one soul mate. Deep down, if you dig into our hearts, this twin flame idea. But in this case, it's not. I don't believe it's really done out of love. It's really done out of control. It's not because. I mean, imagine, you're at your wedding night, and so what happens with these women is sometimes their hymens aren't intact for various reasons. It could just be horse riding, or it's broken. And so what they'll do is they'll sharpen a nail just to make sure that they can make themselves bleed onto the sheet, so that when their husband comes out with the sheet, there'll be something there to show. I mean, the amount of pressure on the supposed happiest day of your life. And of course, arranged marriage, where girls have been arranged to marry off at 14 years old, it's happening in Australia. I don't know if it's happening in the States. They're being also taken overseas from different cultures, because the family believe that it's the right thing to do. Marriage was also a political tool for advancement of the families together. So they would unite in terms of economically. You'd say, okay, this guy's a good match. We'll marry our daughter into his family. We'll increase our wealth. And of course, this is what the royals do. And, all the leading families, they're all doing this. They're all marrying into each other to reestablish their wealth and their power. But what I would say is too, that because of the position of women as chattel, we have a situation where it flows into all these topics like trafficking of women, rape inside marriage, and
because what that translates to is that we're second-class citizens, and we don't deserve a voice. We don't deserve a story. I mean, apparently in modern day, California politics, we don't even deserve medical care. So, and it's the same, it's really the same party that's saying, that, talking about a women's medical rights. So there's a lot of doublespeak. There's a lot of gaslighting, and there really isn't very much introspection. There isn't very, very much real conversation around it. And it's real. And again, like we always say, it's crystallizing the narrative And it doesn't seem like it's going in a very nice direction, right? And the
No,
end
I mean,
result is here the pendulum is swinging, to your point, way in a direction that we don't want it to, right?
yeah, look, I
You
mean,
know.
as benign as the trad wife movement seems to be all very nice and everything, and it's being pushed as we did last week by various players, it's actually diminishing the power of women. Now, these trad wives that are appearing on social media, they're very powerful women, because when you're running an Instagram account, you've got millions of followers or hundreds of thousands of followers. They're generating, hundreds of thousands of dollars potentially. You can't really say how much because we don't know what advertising dollars they're actually generating, but we do know that if they're a big social influencer, they're making money. So they're not your traditional housewives that are sitting at home and are dependent on a partner for money. And then we've got this movement that is saying, okay, the whole reason why society is bad essentially is because we bad feminists have decided to go out into the workforce and take the positions of men. I mean, that's the underlying narrative that's being pushed out there. We should be homemakers and you're submissive to our husbands. So, and there's nothing wrong with having that choice. And we should be advocating women to have that choice. But economically, that's been taken away from many women who are forced to work and send their children to childcare because it's so unaffordable to live. But this
Well,
is not the
from my personal experience, the problem with this direction that we're going in is it's truly, half baked, because at the same time we're trying to emasculate men, right? So how can you be a trad wife? How can you be a stay-at-home wife without a strong providing husband? It's impossible. So it's like they're creating this fairy tale, because if we don't have masculine men, if we don't have the divine masculine who will step into that space of protector and provider and all of those things, then it's just a fairy tale. There's no way that you can ever actually achieve that. It's just another lie of Hollywood, which has now become TikTok, right? It's just transitioned into TikTok, when there's really no real way of establishing it. That's been my experience as a Gen X growing up, at least in California here, where it's very, very liberal. There are hardly, it's gotten more and more godless every day. But, back when I was growing up, it was just the tantalizing, the sex sells thing on MTV and all this stuff. And that transitioned into, now we have men that are looking for the fast and easy, and maybe even women that are looking for the fast and easy. And so, I mean, who can even achieve that? Who can even get,
Yeah, I mean, it's
it's
an impossible
certainly
situation, isn't
not
it?
in
We're living in a
California. That wasn't
society
happening.
where, yeah, we're living in a society where people can go online dating and pick up anyone at any time. And then we're told, okay, look, we can have this trad wife position. Now, it all revolves around the husband being faithful and loving. But what it leaves the woman as is an incredibly vulnerable situation. If she subscribes to this idea, she can go home, she can do all the baking, cooking she likes in the world, raise the children, abandon her own career. And if her husband walks away, she loses everything, and it's a terribly vulnerable situation to be in. So I think
Well, and being
we're,
a
we're
career
still,
woman isn't going to fix that. I was a career woman, and when you don't toe the line, just like anybody else, they cancel you. So, the truth is that we're losing safe spaces for women, because the level to which we're becoming second class citizens is getting, I mean, now you can just say that you're a woman and you're a woman. That is pretty degrading if you ask me, right?
yeah, and even like to your point about the medical side, I mean, women are so abused in the medical system, and it's not just the issue of abortion. I think people continue to harp on it about the issue of abortion, but it's such a nuanced topic. I mean, I was pregnant at 18, and the first thing people were like, "Yeah, get an abortion." No, and I didn't, and I had incredible pressure from all sides. I was wasting my life, have an abortion. I chose not to. Ended up having 11 children. The rest is kind of history. But there's no support for women. Like, like how is it that a woman is pregnant, all of a sudden it's her problem? It's not her problem. It's society's problem, because she's part of that society. It's not a guilt issue. I mean, you're living in. It is a social issue. And then when she
Hmm.
gets into the medical system immediately, and I've seen this with women, is they're immediately bombarded with this fear of birth. like this birth is going to be terrible, it's going to be traumatic, and it gets into her head. And then, oh, you've got to submit to a birth plan. And she's not allowed to tap into the divine feminine of her inner knowing, of knowing that everything's going to be fine. She's growing this miracle baby inside her and this beautiful space, and she has to submit to all these tests. I remember I had to submit to a and I didn't know any better. I was 19 at the time. I submitted to a pap smear test at like 20 weeks pregnant, ended up bleeding, was, sent off, put on a train, and was bleeding all the way to work, and thinking, oh my God, what have I done? And from that sort of moment, I just never went to really medical appointments alone. I think anybody should always take an advocate with you. And I actually did. I think my husband did come with me, but it was just really, people just submit, they don't know what's really going on. But think about the medical test, the mammogram, the pap smear tests, the very invasive tests and procedures they do during birth, and often how they traumatize women during birth. Now, the mammogram test, I don't know if you know, Christina, has actually been not recommended anymore in Switzerland.
Yeah, I stopped doing it a long time ago. Yeah.
It's
Because
crazy, isn't it?
my mother died of breast cancer, so they were trying to bring me in every year, and I did it for a while. And it again, you're talking about very personal procedures, and the doctor that ended my career is still sending me through the MyChart alerts that I need to do a mammogram and I need to do a pap smear and I need to do all these things. And I'm like, excuse me, but I identify you as an abuser. And how do you, he's like, this is just how out to lunch our medical industry is. This guy ended my career because I wouldn't put a mask on. He was so adamant. And I got my Social Security was denied and everything because this one doctor was so obsessed with me covering my face. And yes, I absolutely saw him as an abuser. So the fact that he's sending me these notices, this is where we're at. We're so disregarded that people don't even realize. And then when we try to say that we're disregarded, we get it from all angles. And listen, the women are the worst. My entire, my former corrupt employer, well, they're still corrupt, but my former employer, made sure that every single signature, every single person that ushered me through the door unlawfully, simply because I was experiencing symptoms of PTSD, that was the only reason why I was erased. My record, my career was absolutely stellar. They couldn't point to that for sure. So they just erased me because I was experiencing symptoms of PTSD after years of being an abuse survivor. And they were all women, every single one of them, including the clerk that called me up and told me to turn in my badge, or they were going to call corporate security. I was a company leader. I was one of their first females in the history of the company. And that was what I was reduced to. So that's the answer to being a career woman. I was a career woman who sacrificed hours and thousands and thousands years of time away from my children that I will never get. And now my children are both out of state. And, they can't even come over for dinner because they become so self-sufficient, for that reason, they had no choice.
Born at a different time. And there was a Canadian psychiatrist, his name was Richard Morris Burke. And he actually felt that woman's hysteria was related to her uterus. And they would actually remove and do hysterectomies to cure women of mental illness. Now, this idea, and a shout out hi to Roberta, actually, from Portugal, who's joined us. She's just added to the chat.
Yay!
But so anyway, what was interesting was years ago, I had a friend whose mother also had a hysterectomy, and I asked her the reason why, and it was really, one of the reasons was to cure these mental illness. Now, it's a funny thing, isn't it, that we may not be actually told what the reasoning of the medical profession is, that we're hysterical. That when you enter into the medical system as a woman and you say to them, no, I don't want this, I want a natural birth, all of a sudden you're irrational, right? You're the one that's not obeying the rules and not complying. Your non-compliance is seen to be your hysteria. And God forbid you actually show any emotions. They want it to be shut down. We're not allowed to really, even now in this society, truly express our womanhood. We're supposed to be like men. In fact, men are supposed to be like women. Yeah, they've kind of tried to merge this androgynous being with no balance, because really the divine feminine and the divine masculine are interconnected, with each other. And here we've got this erasure, both towards the middle, essentially. So Roberta says, made it here and catching the chat. Yes, similar experience with medical folks in the UK. Doctor turned on me and apparently turns out that he is racist. Yeah. I mean, race is also a big thing within the medical system. I remember I had a woman, she was Muslim, and she had CPS. I've had CPS turned on me as well. But she had them turn up and they went to her house. And I'm not even sure, I don't think there was any reason for it whatsoever. But in order to make up for it, they ended up giving her a cot. And I thought that it's all a bit crazy, isn't it, that they can actually weaponize the medical system against us. And they know it's the most vulnerable time that we have is giving birth. And that if you don't comply, all of a sudden, Child Protective Services are at your door and saying, well, we're going to take away your child. Or if you're pregnant and you've got you've got existing children, they will threaten you with removal of your children if you don't comply, which is why in my last birth, I completely avoided the medical system altogether, because I was going through a high risk pregnancy. I should have been supported. I should have been given the option of having a home birth where I felt the safest. I mean, isn't it right? My body, my choice. And yet I was not, and I was denied that choice. I was threatened. We were into these underground free birth movements. And of course, should anything go, God forbid, anything go wrong, the state will absolutely crucify you. And we've seen that here in Victoria, where we've got women. And look, every day, say in Australia, I think it's like 6 to 7 babies die. There's probably more since the pandemic, every day of stillbirth in a hospital. But if you have one home birth where something goes wrong, the baby dies or the mother dies, it's an absolute witch hunt, and they'll take them through to the coroner's court and put them all through the media, because that woman should have been in hospital according to, and as you say, the women are the worst, right? The women will not give other women the choice, because life is a choice, and we all take risks. Men take risks going to work, women take risks going to work. Giving birth is the rite of passage, that a woman is putting herself all on the line, whether she chooses a cesarean or natural birth. It's an incredibly, it's not dangerous. It can be dangerous, but it's a natural process. But there is a risk involved with giving birth, just like anything in life. But we should be allowed to take that risk on our choice and our choosing, if we choose to birth at home or not. And this has been really taken away from us. The medical system has really boxed us in. And I've seen women go into the birthing suite and all of a sudden, you don't even know why they do it, but they tug at the placenta afterwards, blood everywhere. And then they'll be like, okay, we'll just give you a transfusion. And all of these incredibly invasive things, no consent, and there's no recourse, right? There's no, okay, sorry, you did all these things not by the book. You touched me and I did not give consent. No, it was an emergency. And this is the line that they can use every single time it's an emergency. And we saw that during COVID. An emergency basically gives them a free pass to do anything. And I know you've got that story that you've shared with me about that mother who's had her child taken away. And I have a story of a friend's daughter who's very sick in Sydney right now. And they're basically severing parental rights over them, limiting the time that they can see their daughter. Her daughter is attached to machines where she is fed and the waste product removed from her. A lot of the procedures they no longer have control over. They're forced to agree to it, because I think what people don't realize is that when it comes to your children, they use it and weaponize it against you, because they're not yours. Like this whole narrative about my body, my choice. Yeah, that's sort of it. And that's only really because they want the body parts from the abortion to feed into the pharmaceutical industry. And then they'll distract us all with the whole morality, the moral right and wrong of it all. But which is, obviously it's an issue, but it's not, it's one of those things that will never end. You can go round and round in circles, in a circular arguments with what is moral and what isn't moral. But in terms of is it right that they should be taking body parts from fetuses and funneling it into the medical system? That's one of those topics that I want you to discuss, right? It's body organ trafficking.
Yeah, it is, and it's also doing our young woman a huge injustice, because it's really perversed the whole thing. It used to be something somebody did under duress, and it was not something that you would encourage in any way, but it was certainly you'd want to support somebody that found themselves in this dire situation. Now it's like going through a drive-through. Now the way they look at it is completely warped. So, that's a whole nother topic, but it's just one way that again, we're just not supporting our young women. I raised young women, and I know how difficult it is. I also, I did it single, I did it working. It was incredibly difficult, and I used to say, if you're not completely exhausted and when you're parenting, then you're not doing it right, because there's so many different especially these days, there's so many moving pictures and moving pieces, and now it's even worse. So, I've been a grandma for a while now, so I've been kind of out of the loop, but I see what is going on with these young women. And, you mentioned Camilla Johnson. This is her story. I want to play a little bit. I just did a Keeper of the Flame homage to the media that has come from this story just in the last few weeks, really, because she's working so hard. This story is absolutely heartbreaking, and you can check it out on my Keeper of the Flame. It's the latest video on my Keeper of the Flame channel on Rumble. But I want to play this. Really, it was a fantastic podcast, and that link is also in the description of that video. From Indelibly Marked. It's just a really fantastic podcast that I think is doing a great service by telling these very difficult stories. It's another channel on YouTube that does that. And this is just a couple minutes from this podcast. I encourage you to go check that out on YouTube. But she's telling you right here, this is what happened. This is a vibrant, intelligent, dynamic woman. We're going to get a little taste of that towards the end. I want to play one of her videos, one of her music videos. But she is an incredible inspiration. She's a teacher, she's a mentor, and she's basically being retaliated against with her youngest son, who is absolutely precious, and what's happening to him physically in the custody of these tyrants is frightening. So you can look into this story. And again, these are stories that they don't do very popular on the numbers. People don't really want to watch this stuff. And again, that's to me another manifestation of how we need to fight this, because these women need our support. And somebody that's going through something like what Camilla's going through, she's just one story, and there's so many of them out there, especially with CPS being the center of the corruption. That it's really hard. It's like almost like drinking through a fire hose. But for me, I just latch onto one that really speaks to me, and this one really speaks to me. And I can tell you, I've been getting to know her behind the scenes, and she's absolutely a true blue. She is absolutely everything from what I've experienced of her. And I've talked to a lot of people. She is definitely the real deal. So let's hear a little bit of her story, hopefully to entice you to listen to more, and hopefully give her some support, because she really needs it.
The way we get treated as women. They always talk about the men in jail. You get treated like trash. They treat us like we are nothing. They speak to us as we are the scum of the earth. And you can never say, I'll never be in her position because I never thought I would have been in this position. And you can never understand it until you go through it. You can feel them, but you don't know. You don't know what it's like when the doors close. You don't know what it's like when you get basic necessities of life. You get your child kidnapped. You were kidnapped and human trafficked. By some letters, So.
Yeah, I was gonna say, leave us marked out, but I mean, I don't. If you can, for anyone else out there that's going through this, could you give them some advice, information, or something that can help them out, or
represent yourself. Learn the law for yourself. Don't allow anyone to represent you. And don't volunteer anything. Read everything. Don't sign paperwork without reading it. And you lose yourself. You can easily lose yourself because if a woman lives her life every day and all she does is take care of her kids, everything that she does is for her kids, and then one day it's snatched from her. What's she living for? Of course, we need a break. Every now and then. But your babies in places that you don't know. And then women turn to drugs. They turn to men. They get distracted. Because they don't what they used to live for. They are no longer. They feel as if they don't have a choice. So what I say is don't lose yourself. Stand up. Stand strong for your babies. Don't try to fight the pain. Feel it. That's where you get the fire. That's where you get the fight. Don't try to suppress it. Let it burn. See what I'm saying? Because they dependent on you. And a woman with fire in her is unstoppable. She gonna blaze the nation the same way that she birthed it. That's what I tell them.
So
yeah, Christina, did you see my chat thing? There's a bit of echo, so I think maybe it's echoing because another window's open or something, perhaps.
It happens from time to time. So it didn't correct. Sometimes it corrects. Anyway, it is what it is. It is what it is. But anyway, I don't know how much of it you caught. If you didn't catch it, I highly recommend that you go check it out on Indelibly Marked. I can put it in the description of this video. But it's a very compelling interview, and I can tell you I'm watching it because I am supporting her. I'm doing everything I can behind the scenes to give her whatever little support I can, which, is not much. But I do have people coming out of the woodwork trying to support her, because if you listen to her story and you hear how just how blatant it is, and how it really tells where we're at. I mean, it really shows, especially here in the United States, which is supposed to be a free country. Like you said, to the point that, they've renamed him. They've given him a false name of Noah, which, I mean, it really strikes me right in the core of my heart, because I feel like we are in the days of Noah. And, this story of this young baby who's been snatched from his mother as retaliation, purely out of retaliation. She was healing him through natural remedies. They were not even giving her actual diagnosis. They actually admit to wanting to genetically test him. He has Down syndrome, so he has unlimited insurance for the rest of his life. And so there's your motive. I mean, it's not real rocket science. All you have to do is really follow the money to figure out what these people are doing. This is a business. And they're trafficking children and they're trafficking women. And there's so many different ways that they do it. When you watch The Sound of Freedom, you're really being corralled into a certain ideal, thinking that that's happening in other countries, or whatever. But that's not the way it goes. I mean, when a woman spends 20 years of her life dedicating her time away from her children to a corporation, and then is not given the medical care and the insurance benefits that she's paid into for those 20 years, that's trafficking. That means that they've trafficked my time away from my children. And when it was time for them to pay up, they didn't. So, they did it because they can just get away with it. And I can tell you that wouldn't happen to a man. And what happened to me would not have happened to a man. They based their whole case on the fact that I was supposedly going through menopause. Was the workers whatever assessment. It just, the whole thing, the way they do it, it's so corrupt. And that my story isn't even as painful as Camilla's story, or even your story, Jeannie, of what happened to you when you were in the hospital. I just lost my career. Camilla has lost her son. And he's not in good shape. Like, these people are saying they took him away from her because they're saying that she is neglecting him medically, when she was actually restoring him holistically And because she is a sovereign mentor, because she is somebody that is teaching people the sovereign path of truth, really, truly, that's what we're here to be, sovereign. This is the one thing they don't want us to figure out, is how powerful we are, how much swagger and agency we actually have. And, and especially women, because we're creators. If anybody is close to the creator in that way, I've heard somebody, I think I was reading, I can't remember where I was reading it, but said something about how God would have the men come to him on the mountain, but he visits women where they are. And that's been my experience. I've had a very intimate experience of the creator through his son, Jesus Christ, and, or his human manifestation, whatever you want to call it. But I've had these experiences of him. He's healed me in ways that, I couldn't be healed otherwise. And I feel like that to me is the ultimate answer. But in the meantime, we have to navigate through this. And one of the biggest reasons why I even have this microphone and this platform that I've built over these last 3 years under great duress, because I'm being heavily censored as a Rothschild Inc. whistleblower. It's very difficult, but I just, like Camilla said, I don't give up, and I refuse to back down. And I know how powerful I am. And that is a powerful message. It's a powerful story. These stories of suffering, we listen to them because there's victory at the end of it. I mean, you heard her. You swallow, you feel the pain, you transmute that into fire, and you become quite formidable. I mean, I see, how much lengths they go to convince her that she's chattel, to convince her she's nothing better than a slave. And you heard her for yourself. She refuses to receive that for herself or her son, or her other sons, because, the part of the story of that story that doesn't get talked about enough is she has 2 boys there that are having to experience the loss of their, little brother whom they adore. And you can see in the video that I did on my Keeper of the Flame channel that they absolutely adore their brother, and he adores them. And now he's unresponsive. His skin is all, broken up. He's all broken out. He's congested in his chest. After 6 months, he was not even a year old, I think, when he was taken from her. So imagine your 11-month-old baby being taken from you for 6 months, and you can't look at him in the eye and interact with that, have that FaceTime interaction, which is so important at that age. He doesn't even it's like he doesn't recognize her anymore. He doesn't recognize his own name because they've renamed him. Why is this system so vehement against women? Why? Because they hate mankind, and it's through women that mankind comes. Without that portal, there is no mankind.
And I think it's this whole, when she interacts with the medical system, you almost have to have some sort of experience doing so, because once they've built an impression of you, of who they think you are, you've already been put in a certain box. And for her, unfortunately, I watched some of the videos that you sent. She's attached to very much to the I would say the wider freedom movement. So she's using certain language that initially will set off all these red flags to them. So, for example, one thing I was told was when you go into the hospital with the birth, the word natural, wanting a natural birth really sets them off, because they particularly hate that word. And all of a sudden you're put into a certain box of this crazy, crunchy mum that is anti-science, anti-vax,
Anti-vax.
Yeah, so they kind of put women into that. And this is where I think, you need to have the divine masculine there in the hospital protecting the woman, because they're not these, they're beta male doctors. They are really not that scary when they're faced with other men, right? They're very, they stick, what they do is they basically gang up on you. When I was in hospital, I found that
they do.
every hour they come in with another doctor to kind of try and break you. Essentially, it was a form of breaking, isolation, control. They would break you. They even, did an internal without my consent, held me down. Another form of breaking the soul of a person. and they can get away with. And then the woman, when I told the ICU nurse who was, head, I think she was the director, no, she wasn't the nurse, about it, she just completely went white. But they're not there to defend you, because they're there as part of the system. They're just cogs in the whole abusive game that's in the hospital system. And unfortunately, she's been caught up in it. And how I would say is that anyone who, first of all, try and avoid the medical system at all costs. If you're going to have any ailments at all, deal with it in different ways, and do a lot of self-care, find alternative means, and avoid the actual system, because you're going into a lion's den. Now, if you're going into the lion's den, you absolutely have no choice. You really need to take an advocate. Even though, look, this is her case, the best method of dealing with this right now is preventing yourself from getting into this situation where you are dealing with CPS and you're dealing with a medical system that's weaponized against both men and women within, and more so women, because I think we're seen to be, and we can get very emotional. And this is what I've learned, is that you can't show emotion in it. You've got to be strong. They're just afraid of you. If you're going to sue them, they will back down. But if you show emotion that you're weak, they're just going to take you to pieces and use every tool against you.
Oh, they're going to take you to pieces whether you show emotion or not. My fighting the system was very emotionless and very intellectual and very documented. It didn't matter. That's the problem. The system has women. Here it is. The system has people so convinced that women are emotional that even a woman that has sliced through the system like a double-edged sword isn't going to get the credit, because in people's minds, women are emotional.
If you're emotional, unless you're sort of seen as a bit of a psychopath too. It's, there's no real winning, is there? I mean, I
think where we win is we start to have these conversations. We have the honest conversations. The dialogue is so important. Creating the community is so important, and really re-educate, excuse the term, but re-educating ourselves. I've been very empowered by a self-education. I've been able to pick and choose, because I was not, I did not participate in university. I participated in the trades, and that in itself was a very incredibly valuable experience. So, there were so many things that I gained from that has so much more to do than gas plumbing. I got way more out of it than just gas plumbing. And it's not to say anything against university, but it's just a completely different structure. We need to get away from the mainstream mindset. It's we need, and the best way for me to do it, I feel, this is what I've done, is to dive into these firsthand stories, because the firsthand stories tell us where we're going wrong. It tells us where we need to grow, where we need to get better. And I can tell you from a firsthand perspective from the minute that I created Power Girl Productions over 3 years ago, the whole premise of this entire platform, besides the fact that I was being heavily censored and erased and canceled from industry, and also from my family, frankly, besides that, it was to feature these people that were standing in the gap, because we were going through COVID, and we were seeing not just the eraser of women, but they wanted our face covered. I mean, it was getting really alarming during COVID. I won't ever let that happen in my small town again, because it was incredibly abusive. So I created this platform so that we could tell these stories and people could hear where we need to do better. And a lot of it has to do with our perception of the survivors of these stories, because people don't, I think the first thing to do is to identify if you're like we say where I come from, if you're feeling some kind of way about what I'm saying and the story that I'm telling, then you need to check yourself before you wreck yourself, because that's you. That's your trigger. That's your own trigger. And triggers identify where we need to grow. Because if somebody's telling their firsthand story, and they're telling their truth, and they're being as real and raw about it, as you have, Jeannie, when you've told your story, as Camilla, when she tells hers, we need to support these victims, number one, by just listening to the story and listen. You don't have to take it in, but you can let it wash over you, because there's like something inside of us that wants to shut that down. And I can tell you, as someone who has had to tell my story to an excessive level just to try to get the support that I never got, to this day, you know, it made me realize how, what do you call it? How we just shut down. We shut down when somebody's
I
trying to
think
tell a painful story.
we've talked about this off stage about how, you know, we don't want to tell this personal stories anymore. We've got into these big ideological arguments, like you've seen what's whipped up over in the media over the Olympics this week. And then people will argue with such passion about those stories. Meanwhile, you know, you have snipers shooting kids in Gaza, like in the head with, and you can't say that that was a bomb that was accidentally going off that's being shown on Rumble. And no one's, you know, firstly, that's censored. But secondly, no one's really talking about it, right? You know, like no one wants to talk about these very deep and personal issues of how it must feel to be a parent where your child has been killed, either by the medical system or by the military industrial complex, or by the jab. You know, like we've
Right.
kids die here from the jab. Even before the whole COVID jab came out and we saw kids dying at chemists, you know, there's a case here that was put up in the media where I think it was two girls in the same family took the shots, both died in the chemist, and the pharmacist has since passed away too. I can't remember the story, whether it was how he died, whether it was the shot or whether he committed suicide, but that story was completely suppressed and they don't want to tell the story. And as soon as anyone comes forward, and this is what I found working behind the scenes, as soon as anyone came forward with the story about their child being affected or killed off by the jab, all of a sudden it was shut down. You had government departments, ASIO, whatever, you know, weaponized completely. They get them, and I asked a lawyer about this, you know, one of the freedom lawyers, and I said, you know, why aren't these parents speaking up? Why aren't they sharing the story? It must be incredible. They thought they were doing the right thing. They took their children, took the jab. You know, as a female, there's that divine feminine need to protect, right? And they really weaponized that during COVID, because, you know, a woman generally thinks with her heart rather than her mind. Some of us are in a different space. So they weaponized all of this. They used isolation. They used all these tactics. A woman goes along, tries to protect her child, and then she finds that she's killed her children. And this is what they've done even with childhood jabs, right? For many, many years, you know, women would come through the birth. It was incredible thing to have a birth of a child. And you're in a different mental space, and you've just given birth. And then all of a sudden the medical system hits you with, oh, you've got to get vaccinated or else with Hep B, because otherwise the baby's going to die. And you're like, you think, and you say to the doctors, well, and I said to them, why would you vaccinate for hepatitis B? How likely is the child going to get hepatitis B? And they would just look at you. And the reason why they actually give hepatitis B on the first or second day of life, firstly, is that you won't be able to tell the difference between when you have a baby, and it breaks the bond between the mother and the baby. And the second thing is so that trains women into handing their baby over.
It did. Yes.
Into the next vaccine. So all of these things are essentially weaponized against us, and the relationship between us and our children, this is a really important part of society that they're breaking the bonds off very early on. It used to be very normal for mothers to stay home until the child was at school age. And even when you go back even further, beyond 100 years, I mean, children only went to school for 12 weeks of the year. They were community organized. A lot of the stuff could have been done there. They were learning all their things from home. And if you go back, hundreds of years ago, trades were passed through the family line, and you learnt from your parents and your grandparents, and you worked within the family. So all of those things have changed. And when we think about the divine feminine, we have to go back further and think, what does that mean? How far back do we go to get back to where we were? And that's why I think we have a clip, don't we, of a midwife, and hopefully this one won't echo, But we need to reach back into our divine past. And I think that's all through imagining, through our dreams, through accessing our consciousness, which is within us, and finding that, because what happens is they try and keep us within this modern space of what a modern nuclear family is like. But we're actually, in order to establish who we are, we have to go back further in time and also improve on that, because we certainly don't want to go back to this kind of traditional society where women are chattel and are not seen with any equal rights or equal standing. In fact, in some cultures, women ruled the house, right? And it seems to be the natural cycle of things, that she has her domestic kind of, but because the tribe respected her and her position, she wasn't vulnerable like we're vulnerable now, because we're based on a capitalist economic system where money talks, essentially.
Right.
And this is why, I mean, like, why would we said this before the podcast, why would anyone even listen to Elon Musk or any of these people? It's because they've got money. So we're constantly now being bombarded by influences that people have to realize they're either billionaires, and many of them are multi-millionaires. They don't live like an ordinary person lives. They are making money, not just they're off speaking and their engagement and their the advertising dollars, but they're actually, some of them are actually getting paid by pharma or various supplement companies, and they're there to pimp you. They really, they are. The number of times, people are using their platform to earn more and more money. This is why they get so much content out there. And also, I was watching this one influencer this weekend. He was talking about how, they have to feed the algorithm, but also how everyone has to get that edge, that story, right? The next 5-minute news cycle story. So this is what you're seeing now within the alternative news and the mainstream news, is they've got to get that little edge of a story. So everything can even be made up. They're just keeping us in this loop, this news loop, but it doesn't go deeper to actually facilitate any change. And to me, it's like, what's the point of absorbing all this news? It's like junk food. You just keep eating and eating it, but it doesn't satisfy you. It doesn't nourish you. It doesn't make you grow. And this is where
distracts you. It's just distracting you. I mean, especially from what's happening in the world right now, where the Dow is dropping every day. And, I mean, we reported on the Keeper of the Flame channel quite some time, I guess it was about 3 weeks ago or so, that, Russia and China are moving in on, they are becoming the world leaders, and, they're taking currency in a whole different direction. And so all of these people that have sold their soul for the dollar, it's about to lose its worth. And so, that's, if anything's going to drive change, it'll be that. And what we're trying to do is to get ahead of that, because, we are going to have to change at that point. And I do think that is part of the mirror image illusion that is created in this Luciferian culture that we live in. The trad wife, to your point, is something that, would repel a feminist, but in reality, that's where we need to get back. We don't want to, for the children's sake, the children are under attack. We don't want to lose the traction. And this is what happens when you're too hooked into the matrix. That's what we call it around here. When you're too hooked into the matrix, you start to believe they're garbage. And, there's no reason why we can't take the lessons that we've learned from history and create a better normal. I mean, at the end of the day, you talked about the natural rhythms of life. I mean, we're entering into the age of Aquarius. The age of Pisces is dead. That was the age of man. And maybe this is what we're hearing is the death chattel of, the patriarchy. I mean, and I don't even see it like that, because I honestly don't consider myself a feminist. I'm a realist. I had to work because I worked because I had to work. and I didn't have a choice, and I didn't want to go away from my kids. I would have loved to have homeschooled my kids. I didn't have that option. And there's a lot of us that, you know, are raised in poverty, and that's just, those are the choices that we have. We have to go to work, or we're going to suck off the state for the rest of our lives and keep popping babies out, because somehow that's, you know, that obviously wasn't where I wanted to go with my life. There was, you know, I certainly had friends that were going down that road, and they weren't friends for very long. You know, we have to gravitate towards the people that are doing it in their lives. And that's one of the reasons why, you know, we get up on this podcast. We introduce you to personalities that are being the change, because that is truly the only way. You know, the news feed is there, and it's definitely tempting, but you're right. It's absolutely junk food.
Roberta's just made a very interesting point here. She says her mother had postnatal depression, and it's like she doesn't love me. And look, that this is a huge issue, postnatal depression. I think, let's see, 1 in 8 births have PSD from birth, and 1 in 3, and they're often dismissed by the medical system as hysterical. Now, this is a huge number of women who have been affected by the birth. And I had a Facebook friend who really basically believes that society could be changed through birth. And at first I thought, oh, how is this so? How can birth totally transform society? Is because all of that bonding happens during birth, and this is where the medical system wants to absolutely control it.
Well, could this postnatal depression be a reaction to this sterile environment that these children are born into? The lack of the women's circle. I mean, women, you know, traditionally have done everything together. They cook together, they birth together, they do all these things. Well, in this new reality that has been, you know, the Industrial Revolution, we're calling it, where we're entering, you know, women into the workforce now, and we're praising her as Rosie the Riveter and isn't she powerful? But the problem is we don't fill in the gaps for her and tell her how she's going to come home after 60 hours of work next to the men in the ditches, and then do homework and do dinner and do laundry and do all of these things that she has to do as a woman when she comes home, that probably more than likely the men that she's working alongside are not having to do. You know, so when she burns out in her late 40s because she's been burning the candle at both ends since she was 11 years old, you know, I mean, this is because why? Because we've lost our women's circle, you know, that I would to original point, women are, and even in Camilla's story, you hear that it's melanated women who are taking these babies away from melanated women. And so not only has our women's circle been sabotaged, but it's been weaponized, because now we can't trust women. And you know, because they're why? Because they're chasing that almighty dollar, which, you know, and this is why Camilla's story is so powerful. Her message as a mentor and a teacher is that this is colorless money. These numbers on the screen, at least here in the United States, these fiat dollars, and actually all over the world, because for the longest time it's been the world currency, right? The US dollar has been the number one currency. Well, it's not backed by anything. It has no actual value. So here we are selling our souls to something that has no actual value. Well, of course, if you had a strong woman who is, you know, out there telling people that this is real. I mean, it's a fact that fiat currency has no actual value. They're just basically numbers on a screen. So, you know, when I woke up to the reality that I had traded in my children's time that I can never get back, and that's all by design, you know, for these numbers on a screen that don't have any value, that can just as easily be taken from me. It was quite a rude awakening. And I'll tell you, it really gave me a perspective of, I am more valuable. That was, unfortunately, to the enemy's dismay, I'm sure, the result of my counseling, as I realized how powerful I was. And that's the power of these firsthand testimonies. When you see these women go through these crazy experiences like yourself, Jeannie, and then turn it around into a story of victory and take it back to the village, you know, and bring water to the people that are still burning with these horrible stories. That's how we change the world.
I mean, for myself, for my own personal experience, I made choices that were totally against the system, and I didn't realize how that may be an enemy of the state. So I homeschooled really for the relationship, because by the time I'd finished uni and I'd had 4 children by that stage, I thought, oh my God, if I send them all to school, I'm never going to see them. So I homeschooled them for that relationship, and ended up having a lot of daughters as well. So 6 sons and 5 daughters. But the interesting thing, and you said about women's circles, is that it's true. You know, the women in the household, because we're also not, one thing I didn't, as a parent, I feel that families do really badly is they put this competition. So they set one child against another, and it creates this really unhealthy environment. So there was 2 things. I never really encouraged competitive sports in the house or in the children, or I never compared each of them, because each of them were individually born different. So the girls have all grown up, and all the boys too, but they've all grown up respecting each other's differences. And also the girls in particular are very, very close. And we do things, you know, we sit there, we cook together. When I had a baby, I was looked
Snow
after, and I
trips,
wasn't looked
snow
after
days.
by, yeah. And then, you know, if I had my time again, when I had my children when I was earlier, I would probably definitely have found a doula. But I didn't even know doulas even existed.
Right.
But I had my girls, and it's like, yeah, the women's energy, especially around the time of birth,
So
raising
important.
children, all of that is just so precious. Just even just being together, just having that presence. And I feel like a lot of women have missed that. You know, they're searching for that closeness, and they're trying to find that in men who generally just want to kind of do stuff and occupied, you know,
They're
with
completely
other.
different in that way.
They're completely different. They're out there sort of hunting in the wild, literally. You know,
Right.
they're conquering
Building,
and
hunting, yes.
all of those things that are necessary for our life. So then they feel like, oh, why am I not getting this from a man, right? And it creates this friction within the relationship.
Exactly.
Whereas what we traditionally had was, you know, women's circles. We had women who were there to support each other, to care for each other. And it was incredibly powerful, because within a village setting, if women are all united and supporting each other, then there's no chance that she becomes vulnerable. You know, like in terms of power dynamics, right? Because 50% of us are women, we're standing together in our power. And I remember during this whole time, we, you know, had little debates within the family about, say, masks. Okay, so we would go out together, and I remember we'd all had COVID, whatever COVID was,
Right.
and we were at an organic shop, and my daughter was just fierce. She just was like, we girls were just like, no, we're not wearing any masks. And one of my sons says to her, oh, I really was uncomfortable with the fact that you guys were out there not wearing masks. And then she's like, but why? Because we've all had COVID. And he's like, oh, because, you know, he was a people pleaser, and he just felt that it was just uncomfortable because of what other people would think. But we, you know, because she was able to stand in her power, knowing that she had the support of her family, and even she didn't, but, you know, like the women in the household were able to stand within their power, it really shifted the dynamics.
It sure
Like,
did. It sure
you
does.
know, and
Yeah.
even in the end now, it's like the boys came across. And I think we'll probably discuss this in a future podcast, the demonization of men. And I feel like boys haven't had that support system. We are still at an advantage. So I don't blame my son for having this, because he wasn't supported within his environment. But I'm noticing how women, when they've got their group of women that are behind them, that are kind of like us, right, Christina? You know, like when you've got a strong set of women who've got their backs, anything is achievable. You know that you've got that support system behind you as well. And of course, it's even better when you have men that are also standing with us together, that we become absolutely formidable. And it's why they want this gender war so much. It's because they want us divided so that they can rule over us. And that's
Well,
the
and not
kind of
just that, they want the children. They are making very, very hard and fast moves on the children in multiple different ways. So yes, they're definitely trying to split the divine family so that they can have access to the children.
Yeah.
That is, you know, that's basically what that we talked about in the last podcast. You know, we told you about the WHO in the 3rd podcast. Who are they? Right. We talked about that. And then in the 4th podcast, we talked about the agent provocateur and how they do what they do. And this is an extension of that. We're extending out this how they do what they do, because eventually we're going to get into the why. We're going to talk about the why, because it's all about to come out. I mean, it's coming out of the woodwork slowly. It's drip, drip, drip. And, I don't know how long it can keep dripping before the dam just breaks wide open. But when people realize what they're trying to hide with all of this craziness on the news feed, they're trying to hide something very specific. And when you figure out what it is, you're going to understand the urgency behind what we're doing here. There's method to our madness. We're not just coming here on Tuesdays. This is, it's hard for both of us to fit this in and to put as much work as we do into it. We're very passionate about it, but we do it not just to hear ourselves talk, because we're genuinely trying to give people a place to come to have these thoughtful conversations. And we do have planned next week actually a couple guys. I'm really hoping. I've got 2 men that are going to come on panel that I think are impeccable examples of the divine masculine. I had one of them, Nicholas Tucker, on for Freedom Friday on my Power Girl Power Hour channel. We kind of got cut off early because I was getting a huge cramp in my leg. I had to go. And he was so on fire. I mean, he's such an incredible example of a man. And he's supporting Camilla in the background with some information that he went through with CPS Court. So, this is how we support each other. We're building this network, this web of life, as we call it. And, we are creating a new normal, because it happens with every word that comes out of our mouth, everything that we claim, everything we reject. You have every right to reject something that does not sit in your spirit correctly, you can observe what happens after the fact and make your decisions based on that. But, I am definitely trying to rebuild my women's network, because I'll tell you what, as I said in my case to my, employer, I'm like, I am not just an employee number. I know to you, I'm an employee number, and you can just erase that number whenever you so choose, because I've no longer serve your purposes. But I am a mother. I am a grandmother. I am a friend. I am a sister. I am a daughter. I am a granddaughter. And, even beyond the beyond, I have relationships with the women, my ancestral women in my life, who have been such powerful influences. I am woman. And so they tried to erase me, and it didn't work out. And that's why we're doing this, is to be an example, because I am having to rebuild my network. And I'm very grateful for that opportunity, because the women that are coming into the network now are absolute inspirations. And now, because of, my new flex that God has given me, all of this has been, God given, because I've been broken this whole time, barely making it through. I don't even know how I've done it, but I've been able to do this because I just did it one step at a time. And now the people, not just women, but men and women that are coming into what I call the multiverse, the Power Girl multiverse, it's very powerful. And it's not just the panel members. It's also the people that, like Roberta Harvey, who's in here on fire in the chat, sharing her experience, strength, and hope. We are trying to create this space for people to share their stories. And if there's a story out there that we need to bring on panel, bring it to our attention, come to us on LinkedIn, on our, Messenger or whatever. That's how I've met most of the people, is just through social media. And they inspire me daily. I mean, being able to, and then become friends with them, get to know them on a personal level, it's very, very powerful, and hopefully inspiring for other people, that are maybe not ready to take that step, but they're hoping to, or they're, aspiring to at some point. That we're all in it together, and we have to fill the gaps, because nature abhors a vacuum. And, the children, the family is at risk. And if the women don't do it, because again, men need women as direction. You're going to share a really lovely perspective towards the end. And I also have my own video perspective I'm going to share. Hopefully it doesn't get too echoey. But I love your perspective that you're going to share later about, women being truth. And we'll get into that in a little bit. But this is how we support each other. This is how we this is how we do it. Just like we did last week. This is how we do it. You know, we are here for each other. We support each other. And all we can do is just learn and grow and interact. We're not always going to agree. We're going to see things from different perspectives, but that's the web of life. It goes off in all directions, you know, but it comes to the central point of team humanity. That is what this is all about, is directing team humanity, because it's the information age. We're in the age of technology. At this point, there's no reason why we can't do it. What I have done with Power Girl Productions and the Power Girl Multiverse, I could not have done, even with my skill set level. I could not have done it 10 years ago, because it took the technology to get to this point. So, you know, we have the tools.
I just want to acknowledge, Roberta, when you're saying that you've walked away from everything in England. No one had your back and you're still alone. Family don't want to know me. I lived 6 years in caves in Spain. Wow. That's an incredibly powerful story, which, you know, we would absolutely love to hear.
We would love to hear your story, Roberta.
On LinkedIn. I think this is what I've also found on LinkedIn. There's a lot of people who are on their own, and I do sort of encourage people, even if you're not, you know, going to come on panel or anything, to just reach out to each other, you know, privately. You can see, you know, I have a lot of following. You can see people comment in the chat. Reach out to each other, especially if you've got, you know, things that you know are in common, because this is how you support yourself. Sometimes it takes courage to reach out to other people, and I really admire all those people who have sent me messages in the inbox.
Yes,
because you know, to reach out to someone and start a conversation with them. And look, not every conversation is going to go there. That's just life, you know, but it's like digging for gold amidst everything. You just have to keep on pursuing that connection. And I think what they're trying to do very much is control that connection. But we are able to, you know, do our own thing, and reach out to people. And of course, be aware who you're reaching out to. It's a risk. Life is a risk, but I think it's worth it.
Yeah, and like you said, everybody, it's not always a match, and that's fine. It's, you know, it's like it's not personal. We all, you know, we all have to connect with what resonates and at what frequency that we're resonating at, you know, and everybody's frequency, no matter where you're at on the scale, is important, you know, and I mean, because where I was at 14 years ago, where I was at 7 years ago, was a completely different place than where I'm at now. So, you know, wherever you're at, and again, this is why I like to talk about Jesus, because Jesus met me where I was at, and it was low. It was low. And he brought me to a different place. You know, I might still be a little low, but he brought me to a different place. He laid me down beside the still waters. He restored my soul. That was my experience. So, you know, again, I don't push anything, but I tell that firsthand experience, because to me, it was what made the difference. It was the moment that I surrendered is when my life, you know, cracked wide open. And what it is today. And I was talking to a beautiful woman I've met in Ferndale yesterday about when we pray for God's will, when we move in that direction, when we pursue a relationship with the divine, you know, and I call him Jesus, Yeshua HaMashiach, when we go in that direction, he opens us up. He answers our prayers in a way that's 1,000 times better than anything we could have imagined. I mean, my life today compared to what it was, you know, what it was 5 years ago, what it was 3 years ago, what it was even a year ago, is so completely different. And it was because I trusted in him through the process. And most importantly, I trusted in myself, because the minute I put on the Power Girl, you know, the logo, and I started prancing around the internet as Power Girl, oh, let me tell you, I still trigger people left and right. And you know what? I had to realize you can have your opinion. You are more than entitled to your opinion, but that is all it is. And it was thankfully all the work that I did to press through the trauma, to feel, like Camilla says, to feel the trauma, to process the trauma, because it is transitory. And to Jeannie's fantastic podcast that I always like to point back to with Matt Goddard, if you process it and you feel it and you allow it and you honor it and you recognize it, it will move through you, and then you can move on. You know, it may never leave you completely, but it won't own you anymore. And this is what they never want you to figure out. because they rule you through your trauma. That's the reason why the news feed is a fire hose. It's designed that way.
Yeah, absolutely. And they're trying to do this every day. So everyone's getting their little bit of trauma every single day, their little bit of argument.
It's true.
X is just a
And
cesspool,
fear,
really.
right? Like fear is such a driver for contention and
I mean, when you actually look at,
miscommunication.
let's say the platform X, right? You only get a certain number of words or characters to write anything. So it's deliberately divisive. So that no one really gets to express themselves. And text is such a difficult place to actually say anything. Whereas when you're actually able to send a message by, and we have all these tools to do it now. We can use podcasting, but we also, if you're actually, you can actually send messages on LinkedIn and on these other platforms. You can record a message and send it if you're not, if you don't have time to actually catch up with a person and talk to them. But it's so much more meaningful if you can get used to doing something like that, because it carries a certain energy and a certain frequency, and the person that hears it is actually healing that person over text. Like even though I'm a writer, and there is
so
definitely
true.
a place for the written word. But when you actually hear, and this is why I think we play the videos too, and hopefully this one will come through fine.
Yeah, you want to play the
voice, because you hear and resonates the actual meaning to you on a deep soul level.
So we want to check this one out. The one that you gave me, right, Jeannie?
Yeah, we'll do the midwife one first, and then we can
All
do
right.
the ones where they tell us where they don't know what a definition of a woman is. And
Okay, let's check this out.
They went into every town and village, and they said that midwives were the greatest threat to the Catholic Church. When you have a family care provider, midwives have always been womb to tomb. Okay, they were the original family physician. They were the herbalist, the therapist, the keeper of secrets. Everything that encompassed medicine at that point was done by a town midwife. So if all of a sudden our trusted midwives are now the greatest threat to the Catholic Church, and we're going through the witch trials, we know that over 9 million women were murdered during the witch trials. It was an erasure.
On the central nervous system of the family and of the town.
It wasn't just midwives, it was children, it was mothers, it was grandmothers. Then the whole city was wiped out from women. There were some cities and towns that literally only had 1 to 2 women.
Yeah, and I can actually see that like happening, where you have women, especially women who are very, very much in touch with themselves, with the natural world. They are totally demonized.
Well, they're being called anti-vaxxers, to your original point. Anti-vaxxers, right?
And they're the ones that when they do engage with the medical system, it's a very, very dangerous place where they'll have their children threatened, their lives threatened. I think, especially around birth, like when you actually see what she's saying about birth, how powerful birth is. And I think one of the highlights, I would say, of my time, my times on LinkedIn during 2022 was when someone reached out to me on LinkedIn, and she was telling me how her husband was not able to attend the birth because he wasn't vaccinated. And I said to her, well, have you ever considered a home birth? And that's all I had to do. I said to her this one word. She'd never really considered it before. And off she went and she did her research. And I sent her, I think, one article about fetal ejection reflex, which is basically about how, you can basically pop out a baby. There's this natural thing within us that when activated under the right conditions will just push out a baby. And she's had a beautiful home birth, and she just had her second beautiful home birth. And I actually noticed in the newspaper, they actually put a story, I think it was of some football player whose wife just had a home birth with the birth pool. So they really are sort of, I think there is a real social shift now to back to this idea. But what people don't realize is that they've actually medicalized midwives. So the midwives today that work within the system have to abide by certain guidelines and rules. So that's, medical testing, compliance to certain conditions in order for you to be able to give birth at home. They're not your intuitive doulas who are there embracing that moment with you, who are in that spiritual domain. They are this sort of a medically detached, almost masculine energy within, on the mental space rather than the energetic heart space, which is where often you're giving birth, and where it's the most powerful. So when you hear this woman speak then as a midwife, you can really feel that intuitive, spiritual woman that is the heart center of society, and where we really want to get back to. And why they've taken us out into putting us into this corporate world and our girls into that world is they want to take away that divine feminine essence from us, which is foundational to a healthy society.
Yes, absolutely. So speaking of healthy societies, do you think it's healthy for us to be trying to define a woman? That's a question I would put to the chat. Do you think we should be defining woman? Let's check this one out real quick.
Dharma in Britain, how do you and how does this government define a woman?
To be honest, Sean, that question's come slightly out of left field for me. Biology, sex, gender. People define themselves. People define their own genders.
Keir Starmer has said that he believes 99.9% of women do not have penises. And I know it's a strange thing for him to say, but given recent events in New Zealand, I'd ask again, how do you define what a woman is?
Well, I think as I've just indicated, I wasn't expecting that question, so it's not something that I've, pre-formulated an answer on. But in terms of gender identity, I think people define their gender identity for themselves.
So there it is.
So the Prime Minister.
You can probably play the other one as well if you wanted, Christina.
Okay, let me set that up.
I love the hand language, or the deaf woman at the other side. It looks very funny when you actually watch it. You go back and watch it side by side.
Yes, for sure. Okay, let's see. I'm going to have to find that. Hold on a second. Anyway.
I could probably.
Oh, there we go. So we have the marriage. I've got the marriage laws. Is that the one you're talking about?
Oh, let me find it.
Okay.
Let me see. That was the New Zealand one. This one. I think it's this one.
Okay. Very good.
A woman is.
I'll respond, Congressman Klein, the way I did last year. I'm here to talk about the budget and how to support the students in your district.
Well, I think it's very important that you determine, that you know how to define a woman. As Ms. Frankel mentioned over there, she wanted to be sure that women had their fair share of funding. If you can't define what a woman is, how in the world can you determine that they get their fair share of funding? If you cannot understand and clearly define what a woman is, how can you make rules that protect women's rights? You can't. So I would ask you to please respect this committee and the U.S. Congress by answering my question.
I respect your role. I respect this committee. And I said I'm here to talk about the budget. And if you have a question about the budget, I'd be happy to respond.
I'm asking you a question and you're refusing to answer.
Be happy to respond to questions about the budget, which is why I'm here.
You're here to answer whatever questions I want to ask of you. And this question directly correlates to the budget.
We are asking for a $22 million increase for the Office for Civil Rights so that we can...
That's not my question. My question is, can you define a woman?
As I said earlier,
All right.
I am not interested
Okay,
in...
so you're not interested in respecting the
This
question
is
of a member of Congress.
Content.
All right.
So it's just really interesting that they're driving this narrative of what is a woman. It's been going on for quite some time, and I don't trust it. I really don't trust it.
No, and we see in Australia there's a big case, as we've been discussing, which is the Tickle versus Giggle case. And what happened was this trans activist joined a women's only online platform Giggle. And I think I've got that right. And basically caused enough trouble, got kicked off and claimed discrimination. And so now we have the different, and of course, this was all done after the government already changed anti-discrimination laws. And so what it's really going to test is it's going to test the definition of a woman. And so on one side, you've got Giggle, the company, have raised hundreds of thousands of dollars in a court case, and you've got Tickle with the trans activists all supported in and going into court to now define what a woman is. So this has dire ramifications if women are essentially erased. The definition of woman becomes nothing. I mean, and we've seen that this week play out. Now, what is the definition of woman? Like, especially when you've got people due to medical. Did you want to play that here?
Yeah, sure. Let's check this out.
Versus Giggle began today, and it's no laughing matter. Entering the federal court in Sydney this morning to fight for his place in women's only spaces was Roxanne Tickle, a 53-year-old biological male who underwent gender-affirming surgery in 2019 and self-identifies as a woman. He's pursuing his claim for discrimination in the federal court against Giggle for Girls, an online chat site reserved for women who refuse to admit him as a member. The court, in effect, is being asked to determine the legal definition of a woman. Is it a biological human female, or does it include people like Tickle, who merely identifies as a woman? Lawyers for Giggle for Girls say this one is destined for the High Court, which will be asked to determine if a 2013 amendment to the Sex Discrimination Act that broadened the definition of women is valid.
That a woman is an adult human female, and that is why we're going to protect women's spaces and women's sport. So it's everything. So what was a case about, a guy trying to get on an app, actually the ramifications for it so much bigger than that.
Tickle is backed by the Transgender Lobby, a well-connected activist group skilled in using the process to exhaust the resolve and resources of their enemies. Giggle, on the other hand, survives on crowdfunding, pro bono legal support, and the determination of its founder and CEO, Sal Grover, and her friends to keep the identity hackers at bay.
And here we have such a nuance today, right? With how do we define a woman? Like, is it by body parts? Is it by chromosomes? Especially what happens to those people who are born intersex? All of those nuances are being played out. And then look, there's been probably thousands and thousands of babies and children that have been medically and surgically altered. I think I shared one recently. Last night, I found a case of a woman in the UK. She is 37, born a man. She was transitioned and surgically altered to be a female at the age of 2. Lived androgynous till the age of 11, suddenly realized, and then was given hormones. But obviously as a child, they didn't realize what was going on until the age of 22, when she saw her medical record and realized that she was actually born as a man. And all of that trauma of having to realize, this is why I am the way I am. And I know we discussed it in the previous podcast about how things like the pill and various chemicals in the environment, who knows what else, is actually lowering testosterone. So then we've got that whole sports debate about testosterone, what's the role of it. We have women in sports, intersex. I'm not sure what the rules are exactly, but if you've got high testosterone as women in sports, you've got to take testosterone lowering drugs, which is not the same rule for men. This is in athletics. So a lot of things about controlling women's bodies, what is a woman, and it's a real minefield, and people are not going to agree. So while we've got this crazy sort of thing on social media about this one Algerian boxer who was raised as a woman, you can see all the pictures of her. Then on the legal front, where people are not actually fighting or not actually whether we can even win there. I mean, to me, I think it's a complete setup, and they're just going to define a woman as whatever the agenda is. It's just coming into play. They're using every tool in the book to get their way. And I feel like this has been a complete setup. But let's see, hopefully we win. But it's what it is a distraction on the side of where people can actually affect social change, which is within their local schools, within their local court systems, the local council areas, just even challenging a hotel that has only a unisex toilet where men and women both go into, where there's no safe space for women. So on every local level, in the corporations, in businesses, that's where people need to challenge and fight for the traditional role of what a woman is, as opposed to this kind of let's go fight on X about it, which doesn't really do anything. Like, it's just one big distraction, and people just hate each other in the end, because you're not going to ever come to a resolution online. I mean, are we at the point in society where we say to an athlete, can you please get up on camera live and drop your pants so we know whether you're a woman or a man? And then, it won't satisfy people, because then people will say, oh, well, that's surgically altered, so we're just going to now have to go by chromosomes test. Oh, we don't trust the medical system. So how do we know that's valid? And is that a valid definition of what a woman actually is when you have genetic modification, right? I mean, like, this is what is happening in our world right now. These are the big issues that are at play in the medical system. And we are just hating on the victims as opposed to trying to solve some problems here.
Yeah, and if we could just not do that, that's a huge thing. If, that one small little baby step, if we could just not do that, if we could not further victimize the victims and whatever that looks like, and it starts with listening to their story and really trying to access your empathy. If you have to try to access your empathy, there's a red flag for you. Some of these stories you shouldn't have to access your empathy for, but you have to get through the cognitive dissonance, because we don't want to acknowledge. I mean, I'll just speak for the United States. Okay, our media has normalized so much, whether it be Hollywood, whether it be the news feed, whatever the case may be, they've really lowered the bar for us. And so we have to invent our humanity. And that's a really easy way to do it. To just, when someone is telling you their story, to just listen to them. And, the most powerful thing, and I told Jeannie this offline, I'm going to embarrass her a little bit today. One of the most powerful things that it really made me connect with Jeannie was that when I told her a few things offline that were very personal, things that maybe I hadn't shared at podcast level, her response was, I'm so sorry that's happened to you. You will have your chance to tell your story. Just that simple response, just that 2-sentence response, if even that, washed over me like healing waters, because most of the people that are trying to tell their story in whatever way, and I'm sure that Roberta would agree with me, they're just doing that to reach out and say, I'm in pain, I'm suffering, I need help. And not everybody knows how to do that. Some of us from a very young age have been trained that asking for help is not a good thing. It's a negative thing. So, it's not easy and so I love it when people come to me. I just had somebody come to me yesterday, that was a dear friend. I stopped by just to give her a hug because her uncle had passed away, and she shared that she was suffering and that she needed the support of another female. And it was such a powerful moment, because in that moment I realized, wow, the person sitting across from me is experiencing maybe the same thing or something very similar to what I've experienced in my life. And the reason why she was able to reach out to me in that way was because I have been so public with my story, and it has been painful for me to do that, because it's really not my way. I'm actually quite a private person, believe it or not. I just, some stories beg the telling. Because that's how we learn. That's how Team Humanity learns how to take care of Team Humanity. And listen, if we don't take care of Team Humanity, nobody will. And Team Humanity is under attack. I mean, it's under a vicious, vicious attack to the end goal of, they're telling you their end goal is net zero, and you are the carbon they want to reduce. So, it's nothing personal. It isn't even a male female thing. It's a human thing. So if we can learn to come together and celebrate each other's strengths and utilize each other's strengths. I mean, that's the beauty of a team. That's the beauty of community is, one person can't do it all. They just can't.
Yeah.
And they need the support. And again, I would really recommend that you check out on my Keeper of the Flame channel this story of Mayani Johnson, who has been taken from his mother, and because this woman needs our support. And there are a lot, and even if it's just to share the video, because the thing that scares the enemy the most is our educating ourselves, as is our awakening. Because once we awaken, that's just the beginning. That's just the piercing of the veil. Once the veil is ripped wide open and we have awoken, then we can actually step into our true calling of who we are as individuals, because the individual is really what's under attack here. They are scared to death of us reaching our full potential as individuals, whatever that looks like. It looks different for everybody, and rising to the occasion. And that's what we're doing. I mean, that's what's so powerful about LinkedIn is there are people doing that every single day. Few of them do it with the fever that you do it, Jeannie. I don't know how you keep up with the news feed the way you do. I'm like, wow. But it's a very powerful profile to follow if you're into that introspective, because it's not just, she doesn't just bring up the stories, but she's really teasing your imagination with her own copy. So it's really important that we have these conversations where we feel very blessed. To anybody who is joining the podcast, whether you're joining the live event that we do on Tuesdays at 2 p.m. Pacific time, 5 p.m. Eastern time here in the States, and then over there in Australia, it's really early in the morning for Jeannie. It's 7 a.m. there, Melbourne time, right, when we start, Jeannie.
Yeah. So we're up at about 6.
Yeah.
And
Plug in. Whether you're here live and commenting, we absolutely appreciate that. Or if you're just watching after the fact, we're doing this for you. We're doing this to bring you ideas, to bring you stories from a different light. We want to examine this news feed through the heart center and to bring it back to the divine feminine and the divine masculine. We understand that without our better halves, without our other side, that's what they're trying to destroy. We just don't have the same power. I can tell you in my own personal story, the installment from the creator. I mean, it's a powerful story. I'm going to start substacking because these stories need to be told. It's not going to happen on podcast. They just need to be told. But the insertion of this man in my life changed everything for me. And I had actually been dreaming about him since I was in 8th grade. So that's how I was blessed that I said, I prayed and prayed when I got out of the abusive relationship that almost just really, truly destroyed me. I said, God, you're going to have to make whoever the next guy is hit me over the head like a brick, because I'm not going to want to do it. I'm going to have a hard time trusting men after what's happened. And that's exactly what he did. And, I would not have been able to get through the 5 years of canceling, of being erased without this man. He has absolutely been my caretaker. He's been my best friend. He's made me laugh. And when we met, he was learning how to actualize his divine masculine, and my divine feminine was able to, we've guided each other along. Really, so it's really such a powerful experience, and that's what they want.
And that's the ultimate goal, isn't it? Isn't that the ultimate goal, Christina?
It really is.
The combining of the divine masculine and the divine feminine together, and obviously us as divine masculine people together and divine feminine. And where they've really lowered, when you're talking about lowered the bar, when you're actually looking at the news, it's a very dirty cycle. It's really trash stuff. Whatever you want to, people think they're quite informed but they're not actually entering into the story of that person, of that life, the nuances of that person's life. And they're not really they don't even know, a lot of these times they don't know these so-called social influencers, who they are. and what they really represent. And often they are farmer paid. They've got vested interests. They've got people behind them that are nefarious, and they're listening to them because they're actually often very well spoken. They're great actors. You know, this is what we've got here. And we've got politicians today that they're putting in front of you that are even bad actors. And they're really gaslighting us now. They're really saying to us, hey, you know, this is who we've got in charge of you, and you can't do anything about it. You know, that whole you know, as children, you can't get me, you can't catch me, right? And this is what is happening, this whole gaslighting of society, saying you're completely powerless, but you're actually not powerless. And this is the whole thing, is we can imagine a future that is better, and people will think, oh, that's all pipe dreams and whatever. But we actually have a responsibility to actually imagine better and to take steps in that direction, whatever that step may be. And that is completely different for every individual as to where they are in their life and what their calling is, right?
Yes.
But if every single person contributes to that that pond or whatever it is, that collective consciousness, then humanity will rise up to the challenge. And you'll take those people who are, I would guess you would say, emotionally, spiritually, and mentally lazy, who just want to kind of just get through life, and they will rise up with it, because the standard has...
You're rising the frequency.
Like what we are saying here, it doesn't really matter how many followers or people watch this. For us, it's really putting that energy out there in terms of lifting the bar of authenticity. And what you said, Christina, in fact, we probably don't want a lot of people, you know, following us. We might get into a lot of trouble. I saw this guy on LinkedIn the other day. Did you see? He had someone visit him from one of the 3-letter agencies because he was posting a bit too much about the real shooters behind the Donald Trump assassination attempt. And of course, we won't get into that of who we think it is, because that is a huge rabbit hole. But he actually posted that he actually had someone knock on the door. So we try and keep it small but mighty, right? This is, and what people are in their own individual lives are actually making a huge difference. So censorship, it kind of works to our favor in some ways. It protects us because we do let out things that aren't within the, I would call it, the mainstream alternative media, where they want to keep people. And I shared with you this week too, I'll put it in my, I'll put it in my uncensoredwisdom.com latest article. I haven't written it yet. My dad is, I've told you, Christina, is very, very sick. So I've been a little bit behind on the writing. He's probably not going to make it. He's just very, very old. But one article, some of these videos that I shared with you were from David Icke. And what he was talking about was this 5 cent media. And he was basically saying how they've all corralled us in here to go so far, but no further. They've set a boundary, kind of like in that show, what is it? You know, oh God, I can't remember. Anyway, where you can't go further than the boundary that which you're set. They're told to you, don't be curious, don't explore any further than this line. And this is what the alternative media does as well to you. It says, don't go deeper into the conversation, don't search deeper, don't find anymore, because when you actually change your worldview on life, you actually make changes in your own personal life that actually then spiral and make social change.
Well, if you think about the ripple effect, I mean, just one drop of water grows, you know, exponentially as it frequencies, you know, as it broadcasts out, right?
Yeah, and that's our individual responsibility to add to that collective consciousness in a positive way. We can do it in a negative way, we can do it in a positive way. And even this week, when I was trying to kind of bring the conversation, I didn't really want to get involved in this whole boxer thing. But then I was like, oh my God, it's just everywhere. I'll just try and post people back to kind of get back into the reality that this is a person. This is a human being we're talking about. Male,
that's
whatever you want to talk about. They're trying to demonize someone that is just trying to play sports. They didn't go into this in a nefarious way. We don't know their story, but really the real enemy here is what we've put out in our podcast. Who are they? And these are the players that are actually trying to kill us. Let's not lose focus of who they are and get distracted fighting each other, because that's where they want to keep us. And this is what you're seeing in England right now, in the UK, where you've got this civil uprising where they've used and weaponized, I would say, even social media and immigration and all of these things, because they know that you can have different fire ants in a jar and they can live side by side quite happily. But if you shake that jar, they will fight to the death. And this is where humanity is at right now. You can have different people living in a society and they can have different values and ideals, and they can live side by side. And in India, that was the case, what we call India, for thousands of years. And then what happened was around, I think it was 1943, they decided to carve up India into Pakistan, Bangladesh, and India, and into religious groups. And then they stirred up trouble between all these various religious groups, and you ended up with millions of people having to flee. And I think probably 1 million people died, which we don't often hear much about. It was called the petition, if anyone wants to look into that. And of course, all the revolutions that there has been where millions of people have died, and where we're at in the game here. This is where we're at in terms of,
it's just getting them closer and closer to their goal of 500 million. That's what they want to bring humanity under 500 million. That's a lot of people they need to kill. So they're doing it in whatever way they can. And this is why, these conversations that we're going to continue to have are so important, because we're trying to bring down the mercury. We're trying to bring people back into their heart space, back into their mind space, with the actual details of the story. To your point, Jeannie, Twitter changed the whole landscape. And I have avoided it for that reason. I stay away from it for that reason. The character limitation. I mean, I was one of those nerdy 17-year-olds that was reading Brave New World, 1984, Animal Farm, Stranger in a Strange Land, all of these things that were basically foretelling the future that we are now looking down the barrel at in a very real way. So when I identified that Twitter was not going to let me say what I wanted to say to the length that I wanted to say it, I just didn't participate. And that's what we need to do. We need to lean into the things that are going to benefit mankind, and we need to back away from the junk food that is just distracting us, because the truth of what's happening in the news right now is that the economy of the world is changing drastically. Is it changing for the better? That's going to be up to us. That's really going to be up to us, because the thing they don't want us to the thing that, Russia, China, even, here in the United States, the thing they don't want us to realize is the power of the individual, and especially the power of individuals when they come together in community. We can really make a difference, and they can tell us on the newsfeed all they want that we don't have any power over it, but that's just gaslighting. It's not true, because you're right. When we get to that higher frequency in our own lives, and the most powerful thing anybody can do, and I'm speaking from firsthand experience, is to look inward, to look into their own wheelhouse, and figure out, what do I need to clean up? What do I need to change? What do I need to shed completely? And that's different every single day. And it can be little steps. It can be big steps. It's whatever you're comfortable with in that moment. But if you can have that introspection, which is what they don't want, the worst thing you can do is unplug from the matrix and go out in your garden and dig in your dirt, play with your kids, hang out with your dog. I mean, whatever it is that gives you joy and raises your frequency, because that's what they're doing. They're actually feeding. I mean, if you talk about David Icke, they're feeding off of us. He'll tell you they're feeding off of our fear, off of our trepidation.
Right? Because sometimes I was watching these videos and I was thinking they're really deep introspection ideas here that he's been cancelled with.
Yeah.
You don't need, and what I try to, even within my own website, is, see, there's all these content creators, and what I realized was a lot of content creators, it's all about creating more and more content to create more and more income. And so it's just basically garbage content. They need to just create stories out of nothing. You really don't even know what the story is anymore, because they need to create this drama so they can get the content, they can get the views, they can get the advertising dollars. And we're talking thousands and thousands of dollars every single week. And this was from each individual platform. So then I'm looking at back and thinking, oh, they've got humanity in a spell. So all these people who think that they're actually awake are actually being plugged in. And I'm not saying don't look and don't read things that are online, but you really need to be very selective about it. It's kind of like going shopping. You have to decide what you want to do, what you want to achieve out of
You
it,
got to
and look
read the
critically
labels.
at who is actually presenting the information to you. Are they an agent you can say it, agent provocateur? Because and that last podcast that you brought that issue up, I thought it's incredibly powerful. You need to look at every single person that you're following and that you're connected to. Are they part of this kind of gaslighting of society, of provocating you to do things to hate, or are they encouraging you to build, to love, to create, and to prosper? Because that's the ultimate thing, isn't it? We need to prosper. And if people, I think, are so traumatized these days, they actually can't believe good news anymore. This is what I'm finding, is that when there is a good news story that's happening out there, like, the good news story was the prisoner exchange that happened. That actually represents a very good news story between Russia and the United States and Europe, where they were exchanging prisoners, because it kind of means that we're probably coming to a closure of what's actually happening. Of course, Israel is what they say will be reserved for last, but we're coming to the end of this. And what happens with the financial system, we'll have to wait and see. I mean, everyone has their various theories about it, but I am of the view that there is no free lunch. So, whether people want to think that they're going to, profit through crypto or gold or whatever, I mean, it might be temporary, but at the end, the only real value is in what you can create. Because if you can't create something material and put it into the world where other people can use it and trade from it, then what you're actually doing is living as a parasite within the system, which is no different from the globalists. And then it basically means there's less for everybody else, and those at the bottom have nothing. So when it comes down to it, like, even let's say the economy crashes and we all go back to zero and everything, like let's say we wipe off debt altogether, well, you just start again, like every generation has. And we still are in a very much better place than we were before. So there's really nothing to fear. What they're pushing out there is this fear that we won't be able to recover from whatever it is that it is, whether it's a stock market crash. Like, when I look back into my own, like into my husband's family history, his family was actually quite wealthy. And then the stock market came, and then one of his sides of his grandparents had to actually work. So then they opened a shop up in Caulfield, sold lollies and different things. And because of that, then his mother, who was from a very wealthy family, met his dad and married and lived a very different life. And it was a different life. It wasn't better or worse, right? It wasn't. Right. And I think in some ways it was better for her, because she just had to learn to actually do things like cook and function and instead of just being a princess.
Well, you become more self-sufficient, and it's fair. I mean, that's one of the powerful lessons of my story, is even though it is sad from beginning to end, that in that I had learned how to be empowered because I have been taking care of myself such a young age. And that was the biggest reason why, when cancel culture came calling, I laughed in its face and said, "You think that you define me? You think that you named me, that you can take my name from me? You are so wrong. And I'm about to show you how wrong you are. And if you want to define a woman, you can look at this woman, because there is no definition for this woman. And I'm just getting warmed up. I'm just getting better,
exactly.
and we're connecting with very, very, very powerful people and I'm not talking about powerful in the elite perspective where we have 1 million followers, to your point, and again, that's a red flag in this day and age. If you haven't figured out that the people out there with 1 million followers are not your friends, then you got some waking up to do. Because you should be out here supporting the small bands and the small clubs, because this is how we get the message out. And to that point, I appreciate anybody who's listening. If right now you can hit the like and share with a friend, subscribe to the channel, whether it be on YouTube or Rumble, even though we highly encourage that you follow us on Rumble, because YouTube has been known to wipe Power Girl out for getting a little bit too close to the target. So if you really want to make sure that you're on top of it, so far, Rumble has been kind to the Power Girl multiverse, and we have not been wiped off of Rumble. But we definitely get shadow banned. So every like that we get, it really helps get our message out there. It gets the podcast to more people. And like I said, I have other channels that we do different things at. We have the Keeper of the Flame channel. Jeannie also has her podcasting channel that she participates, Health Alliance Australia. I have the Keeper of the Flame, which is my exposure channel. It's my technical channel. It's where we get into the details, where we expose some of these systems that are, trying to destroy Team Humanity. And then we have the Power Girl Power Hour, which I really saw as a twin rollout for this Closer to the Heart panel discussion channel, where at the Power Girl Power Hour on Freedom Friday, not only are we encouraging you on Friday to let your hair down, get a little wild, we get into these stories, but we're introducing these people on a more intimate level. We're getting a closer look at them on the Power Girl Power Hour, and then we bring them on panel. We just did that with Nicholas Tucker, who is an absolutely dynamic divine example of the divine masculine. He was fantastic on Freedom Friday last week, and I had to end quickly because I had this cramp in my leg that would not go away. But I highly advise you go check that one out, because Nicholas has agreed to join us for sure. And then I have one that I'm working on. Hopefully he'll be able to make it on this divine masculine, because that is the complementary, that is the component that, we cannot go into the family until we've addressed the divine masculine, because, as we've pointed out in I believe it was the Who Are They, when we were talking about the masculine is definitely under attack. So it's a different kind of attack, but just like the whip, just like the divine the divine feminine, the divine masculine is also under attack. So we're going to explore that next week with Nicholas Tucker, who is one of the people, I've tried to get Gary on podcast. He will not do it. He's a behind the scenes guy. He's the one that's keeping everything afloat. So we're going to let him do that. But he's another amazing example of the divine masculine. But I get to keep him all to myself. So, we're going to get into this conversation, because it truly is when we start to weave together and braid those two divine entities together, when we learn how to become feminine. I had to learn how to become soft. It was not something I came by naturally. And he even appreciates me in all of my glory, even in my craziest moments. He can handle it. And that is what we do for each other. That way, we can grow. You just like any other situation, you put a snake in a tiny little tank, he's not going to be able to get to the big python that he needs to be. And so it's the same thing. And our environments matter, our communities matter, the conversations that we have with each other matter. So that's what we're doing here with the Closer to the Heart. And then check out Power Girl Power Hour on Freedom Friday, also on Rumble. That's where I build most of everything, on Rumble. Because that's where we get to know the freedom warriors. These are people that are going up against the system in very, very real and powerful ways. And the reason why we tell them is to inspire we the people, to inspire Team Humanity, because every single person out there within the sound of my voice, and hopefully it will get broader and broader as we share, like, and subscribe. But every person out there within the sound of my voice is powerful, has a calling, has a purpose. And we're hoping that this transition, because that's all it is, what's happening in the world and the economy and all of that, really on the surface, it looks scary. But the truth of it is, it's a transition. We're afraid of change, granted, but that's why we got to stick together and hold each other's hand through this, because I truly do believe that the best is yet to come. And that, we're seeing the death chattel of this new world order that didn't take. They way overshot, what their goals, we'll say, and it's just not working. People are waking up. It's actually working to our benefit. Every single thing, like the Bible says, everything that the enemy throws at us, God uses to our good. So, that's what I want to end on today, because we really try to end on a hopeful note. We're here for you. We want to hear your story. Roberta, please reach out to either Jeannie or I on LinkedIn. You can also get a hold of me on Facebook. Jeannie's also on Facebook, whatever you're comfortable with, but we would love to hear your story. I would love to, usually like to talk to people over the phone, see what the energy is, hear what the story is. And then, hey, if we can bring you on panel, I would love to do that. So, because we do want to hear the stories, and, we'll either bring you on panel or we'll introduce you to the Power Girl Power Hour, where we can actually hear your whole story play out. That's where we let people just tell their story. Jeannie has told her story there, as well, just to establish that space, because our stories are what matters. Last week after Tuesday, I got a huge download. I got to share this. This will be the last thing that I share. And then we're going to share a great song by Camilla Johnson. She absolutely blew my mind. I was picking my chin up off the floor for at least a couple hours after she sent me this video. I absolutely love it. We're going to end with this song. But the Holy Spirit dropped in my spirit last week after our last podcast, and he waited until I was in alpha state. And I was just telling somebody the other day, the alpha and the omega waited until I was in alpha state, because in alpha it's black, you're in the void, you're neither here nor there, right? And I heard him say loud and clear, they are saved by the blood of the Lamb and the power of their firsthand testimonies. That is what this is all about. We are telling our firsthand testimonies to inspire you, to support you, to let you know that you're not alone, to let you know that whatever you're suffering through, there is victory on the other side. If you ask me, if you trust in the Creator, if you align yourself with the Creator, the victory is yours for sure. So, that's what we're here to encourage. We're here to exemplify. And hopefully we did that for you today. This was a huge topic. We had so much, and there's a lot that we didn't get to cover. So we're going to come back and maybe revisit it. But I thought we did a pretty good job. What do you think, Jeannie?
Yeah, and there was that one thing that I was going to read from the nut.
Yes,
and the mate.
please.
So
Oh, this is so powerful. Yes, please do read this.
So this was actually posted on LinkedIn by Peter Pham, as a lawyer. It says, nut and mate aren't female goddesses for trivial reasons. In my tradition, the very fabric of creation, nut, and the very fabric of truth, mate, are feminine, whilst troth, mate's husband, was tasked with directing, protecting, and acting upon mate's truth. The truth itself was embodied in his wife. She held it for him to act upon, and he made sure nothing defiled it. When it comes to creation, which is nut, the importance of her being female is very obvious. It is through the female form and the womb that a soul embarks on its journey into this reality. The woman is the portal through which we enter this life. She is beautifully and specifically designed to perform the miraculous function, and so the human species has the privilege of continuing on and on. She is considered sacred by most ancient traditions from around the world, and for this reason, the famous symbol of life, the Ankh, amplifies the place of the femininity and its marriage with masculinity in another way. And I just thought that was a beautiful way that we would close out what we're trying to envisage here, is the divine feminine and divine masculine bringing forth new life. And it is what really the depopulation is all essentially about, is snuffing out our life force, our energetic connection to the divine.
We are image bearers. We are image bearers. We are made in his image.
Yeah, whatever that is. But that is where a woman is actually the portal, in which new souls enter into this realm. And it's a very, very powerful thing. And why, this whole thing with sexual organs and manipulation of our hormones and our bodies through diet and all of these things, it's all interconnected, because it's trying to take us away from our divinity.
It really is, because we're powerful. Play the tape all the way through, because we're powerful. We frighten them. We scare them. Again, I always like to point to all of the resources that they put into brainwashing you, into dumbing you down, into fattening you up, into sickening you, making you sick. It's because you are so powerful, and they are so scared to death of you finding your power, like this young woman has found her power. Miss Camilla Johnson. She is absolutely, I have fallen in love with this woman. She is everything behind the scenes that she is in front of the camera, and she has such a powerful message, and this is just a piece of it. Everybody, take care. Have a wonderful week. We will see you on Freedom Friday. We have Camilla Johnson coming in for an update on Freedom Friday. So if you want to get to know this powerful, powerful creature, come check out Camilla on Freedom Friday on the Power Girl Power Hour. She is so powerful. She is so inspirational. This is what happens when a woman steps into her power and defies what we call the powers that be, and shows them what true power really is. Everyone take care. We will see you next time on the Closer to the Heart podcast. Thank you, Jeannie, so much for showing up.
Bye,
We really
everyone.
appreciate you. All right, guys, here we go.
I'm a worthy princess, and I can do anything I want.
I am beautiful and amazing. I'm strong and beautiful. I'm strong-willed but kind-hearted.
I am a woman of God, and I am fearfully and wonderfully made.
I like to introduce myself. My name is Camila Johnson. I'm a woman. I'm not a bad bitch. I'm not a sex symbol. Yeah, Proverbs 33. Yeah, that's me. Woman. Yes, I'm a woman. I am woman. Hear me roar from the core. Oh my Lord, come in my life and please restore everything that has been taken and been shaken. They've been snaking, trying to break it on my life, but they can't take it. On my knees to my God, praying, please destroy all my enemies, uprooted iniquity. Place my feet on solid ground, don't let me miss a beat. As long as I'm with you, I know I will not see defeat. No delaying, these demons I be slaying. They be perpetrating, thinking they portraying, agreeing even then to begin. It was you who brought me through, they never knew yet. I refuse, I will not lose, no, I'm not done. Already won, you are the son who died and hung on the cross for me, the Holy One. Until you come, a Patreon scream from my lungs that I'm a woman. A woman. Woman. A woman. Yeah, I'm a woman. 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 A woman. Cause I'm a woman. A woman. Woman. A woman. Cause I'm a woman. 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 A woman. Child, we're letting that dude play you. Sitting there like a straight fool. Young girl, just sad and blue. When it's Jesus Christ, you need to choose. What else you got to lose? Let the Lord remove all your hurt and bruise. Tonight shall be true. He will see you through and see you should pursue. Though you thought you knew, you ain't had no clue. I'm a woman, yes I am. Straight from the river that am. The daughter of Abraham. Forever I will stand. All power is in your hands. Creator of all my plans. Respected I demand. I'm saying I'm a woman. A woman. Woman. A woman. Yeah, I'm a woman. 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 A woman. Cause I'm a woman. A woman. Woman. A woman. Cause I'm a woman. 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 A woman. I'm a woman, I know you hear me coming. I do this for the youngins, the ones that they keep shunning. I believe my God, he will redeem. The devil, he must flee. We got the victory, yeah. Steady blocking, but they not stopping me. His love is guaranteed. His power lives in me. I'ma take it, cause I am royalty. Walking in sovereignty. I'm way beyond a queen, yeah. I take dominion, so just keep your opinion. Gold medals, no Olympians. You just lost, I'm the champion. No need to boast. Moving from coast to coast. He is the Lord of hosts. It's him I will promote, and I'm a woman. A woman. Woman. A woman. Yeah, I'm a woman. 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 A woman. Cause I'm a woman. A woman. Woman. A woman. Cause I'm a woman. 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 A woman. Yeah. See, that's what it's all about right there. See.
I ain't here to prove nothing to nobody but my God. I got a purpose, and I'm going to walk in it. Please believe, this is just the beginning. Yeah.